If somebody is drinking, then I want to find out how long can they go without it. If they can't, then we're having a different discussion about medical intervention and treatment. But I would ask them to let me know if morning appointments are a problem because they usually have a hangover. Then I'll say, well, let's do our appointments in the afternoon then. And I'm just being really upfront about it is not my job to police their use. It is my job to provide this 1 hour a week that we get and protect that hour so that they are more likely to show up.
Hi, I'm Kym Tolson and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey. Building a private practice can be challenging. I know for me, when I was starting out, I had no idea how to get referrals. I had no idea how to manage paperwork. I knew nothing about insurance billing. The whole process was really daunting. Building a private practice can be challenging to say the least. I remember when I was starting out, I had no idea how to get referrals. I had no idea how to navigate insurance. I had no idea even what paperwork was required. So growing a caseload, navigating insurance, and managing billing and paperwork all take significant amounts of time. And that's all in addition to delivering great care to your clients. That's why Alma gives clinicians the tools they need to build a thriving private practice. When you join their insurance program, you can get credentialed within 45 days and access to enhanced reimbursement rates. They also handle all the paperwork from eligibility checks to claim submissions, and they guarantee payment within 2 weeks of each appointment. So in addition to their insurance program, Alma also offers time-saving tools and administrative support, so you can spend less time on paperwork and more time delivering great care to your clients and traveling the world. Learn more about building a thriving private practice with Alma at helloalma.com/Kym. That's helloalma.com/KYM to get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. I'm really excited today to have Betsy Byler here with us. So Betsy is not your traditional traveling therapist. She's a therapist, and she and I were talking actually about some programs that she offers and some things that she does in her own practice. And I thought it'd be super useful to bring her on here and talk to you guys about it, specifically traveling therapists, because a lot of us, we're on the road and we're always worried about taking on a virtual client that might be high risk or dangerous for us to work with virtually, whether we're traveling or just working remotely. So that's where Betsy comes in, and I'll let her introduce herself, and then we could just talk a little bit about how to manage this unique aspect that we're going to touch on a little bit when you're working remotely or as a traveling therapist. So Betsy, welcome. I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how this all ties in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kym, for having me. I am a mental health and substance use counselor and have been for the last 20 years. I'm also an addict in recovery, and I've done primarily mental health work, and I am primarily a mental health therapist. What I didn't realize coming out of graduate school was that somehow substance use had become a separate thing, kind of, and that a lot of mental health therapists didn't really know a ton about it. We didn't really get trained. And that because of that, there was some hesitation from folks about working with it. So over the last 20 years, I have made sure that not only that I got the training I needed, but that I was learning how to train other therapists, how to help them use the skills they already have to work with this population. So how that made me find Kym is I also have a podcast that is designed to help therapists get the information they need about substance use based on research and science, and you not having to do all of that looking for yourself.
Mhm.
Over the last 12 years, I've spent training staff and interns, and I believe that I have narrowed down what folks need to know. And one of the things that comes up when people think about working with substance use, they believe that they might get in over their head, that they're going to
Mhm.
find something that is truly out of their scope, and that they won't know what to do, that will put the client at risk, and that it will put the therapist at risk. And I find that this is a strong fear for folks. And
Mhm.
I think when you are out on the road, having that sense of you're holding your whole business and your practice in your person. There isn't an office and there aren't colleagues that way. And I think the idea of risk sometimes can feel a little stronger when you are the anchoring point. And so I wanted
Mhm.
to share a little bit about that and talk through some of the challenges and what I've seen in my work and practice.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart too, because I am a certified substance abuse counselor on top of being an LCSW. And I've worked inpatient rehabs and outpatient rehabs and detoxes. And I worked in a detox before there was even it was like a non-medical methadone type place. It was really brutal. Really early on, people would just come in and basically dry out in this place. It was terrible. But anyway, so I've had a lot of experience with it too. And it is near and dear to my heart. And I do hear a lot of therapists say, as soon as somebody mentions alcohol abuse or, taking too many benzos or something like that, they immediately think, I've got to refer out. I can't work with this client anymore because they haven't had the training like you or I have had around working with, I say substance abuse disorders. It's now substance use disorders. The lingo has changed, but I've been in it so long. That's what we called it. So, I kind of wanted to bring awareness to this, even if you're on the road and traveling and seeing clients, if one of your clients says, hey, by the way, I've been drinking too much. It's probably, if we could talk about this, Betsy, clinically not the best thing to say, oh, I've got to refer you right out, and a lot of therapists,
Mhm.
I think, probably do that because it scares them. And especially if we're on the road as traveling therapists, it's like, how am I going to monitor this? I don't even know what to do with this. So I'd love if we could just talk about that. Like what do we do with that when a client just drops that bomb and you don't know anything about substance use disorders or how to manage them? Like what would you advise for the clinician that's like traveling and on the road and their client drops that on them?
So the very first thing for me that comes to mind is when we talk about assessment, we do this all the time. The way you would talk about the alcohol with them is you would find out what the boundaries are. How bad is it? How much are they using? How much are they drinking? How long has that been going on? What happens if they go a few days without it? And just lost my train of thought because I had a window open and I caught something and I read it. And so now I have no windows open. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I hear
And
you.
it's the very same as we do with, say, depression. When somebody comes in and I want to know, well, what does depression look like? Is that sadness? Are you not sleeping? Are you sleeping too much? I want to know when it started, when it was the worst, how long has it been that way, and where are they now? And so what
Mhm.
you're looking for is if they say they've been drinking too much, what does that mean to them? How is that frequency? Is that amount on a
Mhm.
night that they used to drink none and now they're drinking all of it? What does that mean? Because you will be surprised that people's version of what a lot is varies wildly.
Mhm.
And what I can tell you is that folks who are really struggling with alcohol, a lot of times they aren't going to be, if folks who are struggling with substance use, if they show up in outpatient mental health, usually have some functionality to their life. They
Mhm.
usually go to work, take care of responsibilities. And because of that, they have a few more resources and they are not as high a risk in some ways as you might think. There are some areas of risk. There are two really specific things that, if there's more risk to substance use, these are the two things. So
Mhm.
one of them is alcohol withdrawal, and the other is benzodiazepine withdrawal.
Mhm.
Other than that, none of the withdrawals are typically going to kill anyone. And
Right.
so it might wreck their life, but that's not the same thing. So with alcohol, because that's the most commonly used substance, what we want to know is, do they ever wake up with the shakes where they're
Mhm.
having like a handshake? Or have they ever had to drink in the morning in order to get rid of that? If they do have that, then I would say they have to have some medical intervention. I don't know that that is safe in terms of long-term work with no one else involved. There are plenty of doctors that will help with detox on an outpatient basis. And for you to work with them, I would want to know that there was at least a doctor who was monitoring that. And I think potentially a substance use specialist. But if there's no withdrawal, if they're just drinking, but they haven't gotten to that physiological withdrawal state, then I think it's probably okay in most cases for them to stay with you. Because what we're talking ultimately here is a behavior. We're talking about the way they have woven the substance into the fabric of their life. And in order to uncouple both of those, they have to do a bunch of things different. And so for the very first part, it is how much, how often, how bad is this? And that's kind of the first step, I would say, if somebody came in and said they were using a substance. So I was just finishing talking about if someone came in, what was the first thing to do? So I was just trying to help refresh where you were at.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think that's really pertinent to just be able to differentiate between, like, when do I need to reach out to a specialist and when can I try to manage this with my client on my own? And also putting in that framework, it's just a behavioral issue, really. And we work with behavioral issues all the time with our clients with different things. It's like, okay, you don't like the way you interact with your mother, but you always do this pattern with her. Let's figure out how to give you some tools to help you cope with that and change that. So I like when you put in that framework. I think it maybe makes it seem less scary to a clinician that might have that stuff pop up to a clinician that doesn't really have any experience with that. So you were telling me about like something you developed, a decision tree basically on how to decide whether or not to work with clients coming to you with these issues. Do you want to talk some about that or maybe give a little guidance around that?
Sure.
Okay.
So what I thought about was, how do I take lots of caveats about if they're using this much, then this, if this, then that, and put it in a framework that people can look at. And so I thought about a decision tree. And the decision tree is a one-page document that asks you questions like, are they using every day? Yes or no? And walking down and helping you figure out with, yes, they likely can stay with you, or no, they need a specialist. Of course, I want people to use their clinical judgment, and I want people to feel like it is okay to try it. It's not going to be negligent if you try to work with the substance use. You aren't putting them at higher risk. People aren't using substances so they can die. They're using substances so they can live differently because they can't handle it when they're not. They're using to change what life is. That's a commitment to life that we don't always get with our folks. If somebody has significant depression, they're not convinced that they want to stick around. And so that fear that somehow we're going to put someone at more risk, or that somebody is going to injure themselves. Yes, substances are dangerous at different times, depending on the substance, but those folks keep moving. They keep going forward. They keep wanting to get through the next day. How they're doing it isn't necessarily adaptive. But at the moment, this is the coping skills they have. And it is really okay for you to maybe try some experimentation. What would it be like if they didn't drink until this time at night? What would it be like if they could limit it for this many drinks or go this many days? And all you're doing is getting information. If they find they can't handle a couple days, then we have some information and you can talk with them about how do they feel about that? Was that surprising? And if they were able to do it, you can talk about what would you want that to look like in the next few months? Do you want to try this for a while? And you can help troubleshoot. Yes, they've been able to stay away from binge drinking, but they've noticed their anxiety's gone up. Okay, well, we know how to handle that. And so whatever it is that comes up, as long as it's not falling into that risk place of where we have physiological withdrawal, and that's alcohol, and then the benzodiazepine is the other withdrawal that can be really risky and fatal because of the
Mm-hmm.
risk of seizures. Same thing with alcohol. But other than
Right.
those two withdrawals, there really isn't that kind of risk. And so you can just try it and do that experimentation, trying to find the edges. How much can they tolerate before they can't control their use anymore?
Mm.
And helping them figure out what they want their relationship with their substance to be like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a good point. And then even then, if it looks like they can't control it, I don't know your thoughts on this, but referring to like a higher level of care, but staying connected to the people that are working with them in the higher level, and then bringing them back to you. If you've got this, established relationship with the client, you've got great rapport, you've been working together for a long time. I think that's the other thing, at least I've seen with clinicians like in the traveling therapist group and membership now, once they transfer them to an IOP or a higher level of care, they just are kind of done with it. They don't want to take them back because maybe they don't know how to manage, once they come back and they're trying to stay sober, stay clean, and that sort of thing. So I don't know your thoughts on that, or how a clinician would manage that if they wanted to keep working with the client, or felt like maybe they shouldn't work with the client anymore. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's always a great idea, almost always, to continue working with the client for a few different reasons. So one is that there aren't a lot of therapists that specialize in both mental health and substance use. Kym and I, being two of those, are kind of rare.
Yes.
And and because of that, when you send someone to a substance use specialist, the chances are you're sending them to a bachelor's level person, which isn't bad.
Mhm.
They've been trained. But the mental health piece is going to be woven into their substance use, and they are going to need some mental health care. The substance use counselor is going to stay in their lane for the most part, and they want to work collaboratively with you because they are handling one piece and they want you to be able to handle the part they don't know how to do.
Mhm.
Additionally, though, I think having providers who communicate with each other and who are on the same page just adds a layer of support and gives
Mhm.
them a sense that they don't have to try to compartmentalize their substance use, because it's not compartmentalized for them.
Mhm.
They don't care that that person's just substance use and you're just mental health. The client doesn't really notice that part as much.
Mhm.
And so you being able to stay with them gives them some continuity. And one of the things we know from research is that the relationship with a helping professional is the top reason that people get better in therapy. The highest
Mhm.
percentage is that quality of a solid relationship. And so it matters that it's you. Like, it
Right.
matters that you are involved. And so when
Mhm.
the person goes IOP, intensive outpatient, or maybe they go to meetings or they're going to a group of some kind, you can ask them what it's like. Tell me what it's like when you go there. How many people are in the room? What kinds of things do you guys talk about? You can make it a point to ask them how they're, if they've used anything this week, what their goal was. You're not necessarily commenting a ton on it, but you're checking in and making it part of what you guys do. I always recommend getting permission to do so from your client,
Mhm.
letting them know that you really want to support them in whatever goal they're reaching towards, whether that's total sobriety or harm reduction, which is more of a moderation kind of model. You want to stay in step with them wherever they are. But I find that when you have permission from people, they're okay with that. And you're not like the voice of authority, like, did you drink this week? It's really
Mhm.
more, so did you have anything to drink this week? And they'll say, nope. Does that feel good? Is that pretty easy? Is that difficult for you? And it tells you about their week. And instead of keeping this other part of their life separate from you, you're
Mhm.
now bringing it in, because their mental health will rise to a higher level of need once they're not using. It will go
Mhm.
down eventually, right? But that initial pulling away a coping skill, and a really powerful coping skill, you're going to see depression deepen and anxiety rise. because we just know that's going to happen. But you
Right.
staying involved with them is a huge benefit to them, and it will strengthen your relationship with them, and you get to keep your client that you've already invested a lot of time in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So, Betsy, I know that you actually work with clinicians, like you have a program, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Clinicians trying to help them get comfortable working with this population, not necessarily training them to be a certified substance abuse counselor or anything like that, but just helping them get comfortable with it. So, I'm just wondering, like, what are some of the common things you hear, like not new therapists, but just therapists not familiar with this treatment modality? What do you hear them like really struggling with, the things that scare them or make them want to just not touch it with a 10-foot pole? And, I wonder if we could just talk about a couple of those and how you would, help a therapist navigate that a little bit better, if you have any ideas around that.
Sometimes people will say to me, what if someone comes in drunk? Or what if someone shows up to session high?
Managing a successful private practice can be challenging, even if you have all the skills and experience you need to support clients. Most training programs offer little to no guidance on running your own business. That's why Alma gives clinicians the tools they need to build a thriving private practice. When you join Alma, you can get credentialed with major insurance payers within 45 days, as well as guaranteed payment within 2 weeks of each session. You can also attract clients who are the right fit for your practice with a free profile in Alma's searchable directory. As you build your caseload, Alma also offers time-saving tools and administrative support, so you can spend less time on paperwork and more time delivering great care to your clients. Visit helloalma.com/Kym to download your free guide to identifying and connecting with clients who are the right fit for your practice. That's helloalma.com/KYM to get your guide.
And I can tell you that with virtual therapy, the incidence of that is higher, right? I've never had anybody smoke or vape in sessions before until I went virtual, right? And
that's so true.
It's a really different world, right?
Yes,
to
that's so true.
have that be happening mid-session, because I was not practicing in the 70s when everybody smoked everywhere.
Yeah.
But they do now, and I don't have any reason to tell them not to. And so I leave that alone. But what I will say is that can happen, and no, you can't smell it if it's through the screen. But one of the things is you want to talk with them about what your boundaries are around using before session. It's a really normal conversation to have. So for instance, when I find out someone's using marijuana, lots of people are not concerned about their use of marijuana. They really don't think it's a problem. And I'm not saying if it is or isn't. I have opinions about marijuana can have an appropriate place, and then it can be in a non-appropriate place, depending on the person. But what I ask them is, I don't want you to smoke or use marijuana for 4 hours before you come to see me. 4 hours, because they're not actively high, but they're also not in acute withdrawal. There is a withdrawal to marijuana. It's just not that bad, but I don't want them agitated and cranky and having a headache.
Yeah.
While they're in session, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want them focusing on when they can go get high. I want them with me. And I explained to them that the reason for this is that marijuana separates you from time and space. It is a depressant, first of all, but it is also, there is some psychedelic quality to it in the THC, and that is designed to separate you from time and space. It's slightly dissociative. And when they're in therapy, I need them present. And I've really never had anybody question me on it. I have certainly had people. I had this happen this week with one of my teenagers. He admitted to me that he was high the week before, because I asked him flat out the next week. I'm like, were you high? He's like, I forgot I had therapy and I had just gone out to my car. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about why you're vaping during school. So that was a different conversation. But he knew, and he was nervous because I had talked with him And what I expressed was just that I wanted him to show up and be willing to be present with me. And we have rapport. And so I know that he does respect that. And as for adults, they're usually fine. They're just like, okay. And I'm not criticizing their marijuana use. I'm not suggesting that it's bad. I am introducing the concept that it's not neutral, that it does have an impact, and that it does impact their emotions. So I set a boundary around that. If somebody is drinking, then I want to find out how long can they go without it. If they can't, then we're having a different discussion about medical intervention and treatment. But I would ask them to let me know if morning appointments are a problem, because they usually have a hangover. Then I'll say, well, let's do our appointments in the afternoon then. And I'm just being really upfront about, it is not my job to police their use. It is my job to provide this 1 hour a week that we get and protect that hour so that they are more likely to show up. I do not want someone who is drinking every evening to go to sleep coming to see me at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Because they are not going to be awake enough until they can get moving and kind of clear out all the cobwebs, so to speak. And I find that approaching that from a really matter-of-fact place, encouraging them that there is no judgment about this. I just want to make sure we don't set things up to fail. And as a non-morning person myself, like, I don't even have 8 o'clock appointments, but as a non-morning person myself, I know when I function best. And that's when I try to do appointments. And so, somebody could show up under the influence. You will usually be able to tell if you know the person well enough. And then you can talk with them about, does it make you anxious at all to think about coming to therapy without having smoked marijuana before? So let's talk about that. How can how can we help make this feel safe so that you aren't afraid that I'm going to just start dropping trauma topics on you?
Yeah,
right?
Really. Right.
Right. And so it's trying to increase this tiny bit of distress tolerance around therapy and building some trust with you. And it really is a great tool. And I find it helps build relationships.
Yeah. And I love that you're pointing out to just talk so frankly about it, because I think that's something I do hear with therapists that aren't sure how to work with this. It's like, well, I don't want to say anything. Like, what if they get upset with me? Or, I don't want to ask too many questions about it, which is typical in a family dynamic where there's a user, or just the community where there's somebody using a little bit more. Like, we're all afraid to say something for the most part. A lot of people are, or to ask or to talk about it openly. So I like hearing you say that, like giving the permission, like, yes, it's totally fine to ask how often and when, and if it's uncomfortable, and, bring up the fact that you might be nervous about talking about your trauma, and, that it might make you want to use more, like just really normalizing that, like asking questions and talking about it with a non-judgmental attitude, just like kind of a matter of fact thing. I really love that.
I think that there is a lot of fear of people offending others. And I think that, again, asking permission is a way to under kind of that anxiety of saying, so when we first got together, you mentioned that sometimes you use alcohol to kind of manage stress. I wanted to find out a little more about that. Is it okay if I ask you questions? Very simple. And like if they have defensiveness, then you can say, so you don't look like you love that. Talk to me about that. And it could be that someone's criticizing them, and so they're feeling defensive. And you are separating yourself from the other, whoever that is, or whatever system that is, by saying, you are an adult and substance use is normal. People have been using substances since there have been humans. And so the question is it interfering with your life at all? And that's all my concern is, because you are here because you want to do differently in this part of your life. I want to make sure that there isn't anything in your way that I haven't considered. And so you're presenting it in this way of like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to make sure that I can foresee problems. coming up and I
Mhm.
can help you navigate that. And I find that people are really open.
Yeah, I really love that. And before we hit record, actually, we were chit-chatting a little bit and just talking about, I think a lot of therapists maybe don't realize that they already have sort of a repertoire or like a toolbox that can help with this. You were saying, there's not like a DBT for substance use disorders. There's not, like the specific modality, but I wonder if we could just talk about that a little bit. Like, what tools in our toolbox do we already have as clinicians that we can use to help with this population if we're seeing this show up in our practice with our clients?
I appreciate you asking that because I think that among the concerns from therapists about addressing this, they get concerned about, I won't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, as you were saying, Kym, there isn't anything that you can go and get the modality training to work with substance use. It doesn't exist. The closest we have is motivational interviewing. And the biggest point in motivational interviewing is to roll with resistance and to not get into a power struggle over someone's opinion. And while I think that is excellent, I think we all do that when we meet a wall with our clients and they're like, look, I don't want to give that up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just back up a minute and see where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, the stuff that I use with my clients, and you probably find the same, who are using substances, it's the same skills I use with everybody.
Right.
It's talking about pros and cons of a certain behavior and secondary gain. What are they getting from this? And when is enough? When is it too much? Is the cost too high yet? And if it's not, then it's not. Talking about what it might be like to give something up, the good and the bad, because if they're using for a reason and they're getting something good out of it, and then that's going to go away, how are we going to plan for that? It could be distress tolerance skills that are part of DBT. It could be mindfulness, which is a huge deal when it comes to substance use, because in the moment, a craving is all about solve me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need them to teach them to do is to ride through the moment, use a different skill, and get past it, because cravings last anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes and they pass. It's getting through that space that is an issue. Or EMDR, I use a ton. And so the concept of a container and a calm, safe place, those are easily usable for folks who are using substances. So when they notice that they're having a craving or these thoughts to use, that they have a place to put them and that they can help regulate themselves. In all sorts of modalities, there is a way to take most skills and apply it to substance use. It just takes a little creativity there, but it is behavior modification at its core. Yes, if somebody's in addiction, then we're talking about something slightly different. And there are some very significant brain changes that make that challenging. And you will figure that out if the person can't moderate. If they try to moderate and cannot, then we know that something else is going on. And you may decide that they need a little more education. And so going to a treatment center isn't going to rehab. They have lots of things that aren't inpatient residential. It is psychoeducational groups, hearing from others what their story is like, and understanding why they use the way they use, and taking the shame out of that. And having someone who is trained to do those specific things could be really great.
Absolutely. And like we were saying earlier, going on that journey with your client, like, okay, so, why don't we check back in 4 weeks after you take the psychoed class, or, whatever feels right for the level that the client's at. But staying on the journey with them to keep that trusting relationship, because as you said, I mean, that's the most important part of any therapeutic relationship, is that trust and rapport and knowing I've got the support system no matter what I do, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, we know attachment is the strongest force, right? We know that, and it's not just primary attachment, but I think that's what sets us up. And clients do attach to us, and they have a little Betsy in their head or a little Kym that they take with them. And they're like, I heard your voice
Yep.
telling me to do the thing. And people do take us with them. And it is something that I think that helps them if we can speak the same language they're speaking. Whatever they're talking about with their substance use people, if you can use their language and model their language, then it builds that even tighter. And not in the point that they're dependent on you, right? That's not the goal. It's a matter of, can you understand this part of me? If I trust you with my substance use, will you see me differently? Will you act different? Will you be weird about this? Or can I share this last piece with you that I didn't tell you? Can this be in this room too? And of course it can.
Yeah.
I understand the fears, and I really do. What I want to encourage your listeners is that conscious competence happens over time. When we have this conscious competence where we're conscious that we're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like the only way through that is to keep doing it. And you will find these moments of like, I did that really well. They said they were drinking a lot and I didn't even feel nervous. Like it will get to that point where you feel comfortable with it because truly you know how to be with people. And that is all this is. We are with someone in whatever it is that they're at. And it gets more natural the more often you have those conversations, and reminding that part of you that is fearful that you're not doing anything to put them at risk. They're the ones that are using substances. There isn't a court in the land that's going to try to hold you responsible for someone else's drinking. It's not reportable. And you aren't the one responsible for that. And so I just want to encourage people when that pops up, or when colleagues, well-meaning colleagues, will be like, oh, I wouldn't do that. I don't want to put myself at risk. Just close your ears to that. And they have we all have our level of risk aversion. But truly, if you stop and think about what would the risk really be, there really isn't. You just are documenting that if you referred them, whether they followed through or not, there might be a point where it's getting more serious and you have to decide, like, do I keep seeing this person or not? And that's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a listener who asked for consultation, and we talked about a specific case to say, when would you stop seeing this person? And we talked through it because it is a clinical issue. And you can reach out for consultation in either to me or to someone else who offers that to help yourself. But that's going to be really few and far between. Like one client out of years and years and years might put you in that position. Yeah. It's not going to be, it's such a low incidence where you're going to have that problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Such a good point. Absolutely. Well, so if a clinician's listening to this and they're like, okay, maybe I just do need a little more awareness of how to handle this, how do you help clinicians with that?
So there's a few different ways that people can interact with me. One is the podcast. It's called All Things Substance, and it's on all the podcast platforms. I think I'm on 132 this week. And
wow.
So there are lots of episodes to choose from about a lot of different topics, substances, treatment, assessment, etc. I have a learning hub on my website at betsybyler.com/learn. And there are webinars that you can take. Some are free, some are there for purchase. There is also substance use decision tree that I talked about, and a treatment planning tool that I created. And then kind of the big thing, the more comprehensive thing, is my main group program, which is called Charting the Course. And it's a 6-week live taught course that has these modules that are built to give you what you need in order to work with substance use. You don't need all of the information. If you go look at continuing ed programs that have comprehensive programs, they are so many hours and so much detail, and you really don't need all of that, nor do I think you have the time. You travel for a reason, right? I don't think you're traveling so that you can spend the next 50 hours learning all sorts of things that you may or may not need. So what I've done is I've
agreed.
taken what I believe you need to know over the years that I've trained therapists, figuring out, okay, you need these things and you need some of this, and putting it all together for you to say, here's what you need. And then there are resources that are in the resource vault to help you with that, like worksheets and whatnot. And then there's 6 months of their monthly group consultation calls for 6 months after. So it's just one call a month, and you can attend or not as you wish. And it is built to help support you in the long term so that you really can use these skills. Because I feel like right when you leave a training, you need to use skills, otherwise they go away. And things will come up that you're like, Betsy didn't talk about that. And because clients can always come up with something we didn't plan for. And I want you to be able to check in during the program. And we will have a Voxer group, which is a free app where we can communicate with each other. Those of you who are in the cohort and myself, you can engage or not engage as you wish, but it's a simple way to send a text or a voice message saying, hey, this came up today. I don't know what to do. And it's not necessarily about a person. It's not a HIPAA issue. It's just what do I do if this happens? Well, I can answer that, or a colleague can answer that, but you have this access and support while you're doing this new thing that can feel a little scary.
Love that. I just love that you're putting that out into the world. To just give some ease to therapists being able to work with this stuff, especially to the traveling therapist, because like you said, we don't, a lot of the traveling therapists I talk to, it's like, I don't want to have to keep doing this marketing and networking. And I just want to have these clients that, are my core clients. And I don't want to have to think about all that while I'm trying to travel and enjoy my life and all. So this is another thing to consider. Like if your client mentions alcohol and you immediately refer them to somebody else, this is a way to keep engaged with your caseload too, and not have to worry about always this turnover thing. So I just think it's so valuable. And I think it's what are the statistics on this? 1 in every 4 people has some sort of substance use issue that they're probably going to talk about a little bit in therapy. I don't know. Is it 1 in 4? I'm not sure of the statistics. Do you?
I don't know what it is right now. What I know is that over COVID, certainly alcohol use rose a huge amount, and especially among women. And the struggle is that we all want to hide places that we're ashamed of, right? And doing anything in excess feels somewhat shameful. And a lot of times people don't tell unless you ask, because they don't want to either admit it to themselves or to you, or they don't want to seem like they're weak. They have, recrimination in their head about what they're doing. And I have found that there have been times when I've been working with someone and I'm hitting a wall and I can't figure out why. And I'm like, wait a minute. Because I'm like, could this be the puzzle piece? Why are none of these interventions working? Why do these coping skills not work for them? Oh, well, they're drinking 3 glasses of wine at night. And by glasses, I don't mean those are 5-ounce glasses of wine, right?
Right.
It's more than that. Well, of course, it's not going to help them sleep. They're not going to, because there's this other issue. And I just didn't know because it didn't seem connected to them. So it is there in a lot of ways. It's just, I think we weren't really taught to watch for it. And so we might miss some things. And truly, there have been times that I have missed it, or a client has told me, no, they're not doing anything. And I find out later they were. So
oh yeah,
that happens. But I think
normal for that to happen.
Right, exactly. But I think when you're traveling and you're worried about risk, but also wanting to keep a core caseload, don't let substance use be the thing that either turns you away from a client or that makes you have to refer unless you need to. It isn't everyone. In fact, it's going to be way less than you think that you would need to refer. Those folks who are using at a really heavy level usually don't show up in mental health. They show up in a treatment center because of a legal issue. When I ran a treatment center, 92% of our caseload at any given time were court mandated.
Yeah.
Okay, that means only 8% of people were there because they either wanted to be or a family member pushed them to be. Because what happens is when someone's using really heavily, they end up in legal trouble somehow. Right.
Yep.
And so that's not how they're going to show up in your office for the most part. Once in a while they will, but typically not. And so you can kind of rest assured that when they're using at that level, the legal system's going to push them to get involved in something.
Such a good point. Well, Betsy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. And I hope it's helped you guys, especially those of you on the road that aren't sure what to do with the stuff when it comes up. I hope you find it helpful and it can help you stay connected to your clients and not so afraid of this topic. So thanks a lot, Betsy. And we're going to put all of your information in the show notes, and you guys can reach out to Betsy if you want to work with her.
Thank you so much for having me, Kym.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you loved this episode, please leave a review.